Hey there, friends. Welcome to the Being Brown and Bold podcast. I am your host, Jess Thomas. I'm so glad that you're joining me for all these inspirational conversations from people who really inspire me. So get ready for my next guest. Today, I am chatting with Brittany Muddamalle. Known on the socials as Almost Indian Wife, thousands of followers check in for her daily humor and relatable content. Brittany has dedicated the last decade to help multiracial families navigate and celebrate the diverse cultural backgrounds they come from. Drawing from her own biracial heritage and her husband's Indian roots, Brittany understands the unique challenges and joys of interracial relationships. Together with her husband, she has 4 kids, 2 dogs, and a whole lot of chaos as they navigate 2 cultures. So Brittany, it is so amazing to have you here on the podcast today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to chat with you.
So usually I have people with difficult names or different from Western culture names, but tell us about your whole name and how to pronounce it properly. What does it mean?
I love this question because so often people get it wrong. And my kid's motto is just ignore it and move on. And I'm like, oh, no. Actually, this is my name. So my first name is Brittany, obviously, very easy. Okay, very simple to say. And then my last name is Muddamalle. And I believe it actually means, I'm going to have to double and fact check this with my husband. I think it actually means jasmine flowers, which is really cool.
Yeah, actually, I had him on the podcast and he told me that that's what it meant. And
beautiful.
then he
Okay,
talked
good.
about his jasmine plant. And that is the sign.
The one that I killed
later.
It's passed on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. We too have had many a jasmine plant that have not survived in our household. So
they're very complicated plants. I don't know how people keep them alive.
Well, Brittany, tell me, what does it mean to be you?
Oh, wow. That's such a big question. Obviously, I am white. I grew up in Washington State, not Washington, D.C. And I just grew up with, my mom and my stepdad and just a very white community, honestly. Not a lot of diversity where we lived in Washington. I ended up meeting my husband when I was actually 20 years old, which was really crazy. We were just itty bitty babies. And we got married when we were 20 years old and he was 23. And I just felt like my whole world was opened up to the fact that I didn't understand the very limited worldview that I had. And all of a sudden I met this person who, he had all these ties in India and his family was from there. And, I became very passionate about opening people's eyes to the actual world in this diverse, beautiful world that we live in. And then we have 4 beautiful, wild children. And I think even now, I just love doing this journey with them, and I'll never understand obviously truly what it means to walk their path in their lives, but I love just figuring it out with them. And I think my just passion is to do that with people and to have hard conversations, but to bring it up in kind of a fun, humorous way to just get people talking.
You say that you're white, but
Yes.
We all come from different ethnicities. Can you share a little bit about your cultural heritage, any significance it had in your upbringing, or even now, how does it inform your life and work?
Great question. So I always kind of say I'm white. My mom is white. She used to call herself a mutt, which is a great term, right? But she would say that she was a bunch of little things. I just kind of grew up thinking I was just Caucasian. That's just kind of what my background was. And I was not raised with my biological father. I was raised by my stepdad, who actually went on to adopt me. But I met my biological dad when I think I was 22, 23, and found out that he is actually Romani. So that was this whole new world for me, and understanding actually I'm biracial. I'll be very transparent. I have not done a deep dive in that. I think that just meeting your biological dad and all of just the pieces and some of the trauma that kind of brings up in your life, I think that I've been kind of slow in that process. So I think a lot of it for me is, I grew up with a very independent, my mom was single for a very long time before she met my stepdad. So I think a lot of what I would say is my culture is just these very independent, strong women. In my family, they call them the king women, which is my maiden name. And so it's the king women are strong, independent, they lead everything. And I feel that has been something that I've definitely brought forth just from my family culture itself.
You grew up in this heritage, you're in this marriage, you have these children, and all of it is multicultural. How did that all come about even?
Yeah, well, I just remember, obviously I married my husband when I was a baby, I was 22 years old or 20 years old. I was like very, very young. I remember getting into the spot where I was trying to navigate it all. I mean, there's no maliciousness in it, but like my parents, like I think expected us to do things more of like the Western kind of American way. His parents assumed that we would do things the Indian way. And I started to feel this intense pressure to be Indian. And at first I did it. And I was a young kid, people pleaser. I was like, I want to do whatever makes people happy. Like, I just want to make everyone love me and just, I want to be accepted. All of a sudden I was like, wow, I'm failing. This isn't working. And I kind of had this like come to Jesus moment where I was like, why isn't this working? Oh, because I'm not Indian. Like I'm setting these unrealistic expectations for myself. And so I kind of termed this like funny little phrase, like I will always be the almost Indian wife. Like I will try to embrace things. I will do whatever I can, but I'll never truly be Indian, and that's okay. And I just remember like some of those pain points in that season where I felt alone. I felt like people didn't get it. Some of the things that I would share with friends that I was trying to embrace my partner's culture, they would deem as red flags, even though they were not red flags in Indian culture, but maybe they were red flags in Western culture, because there was not this understanding of different cultures. It was people's understanding of their way is the right way. And I just remember looking around, like just pleading for help. I wanted someone that understood, someone to give me advice or just anything and have that community. And at the time, there was none of that around. And I just remember thinking to myself, if it's not there, why don't I just create it? Why don't I just create this platform where I can talk about my struggles, talk about things that I've loved, and hopefully just connect with a couple people? And back then in like, what was that, like 2010 or something. So I started blogging, sharing like little bits and pieces of my, like what I was walking through. And it just started to blow up, not in a way where it was like about me, it was about people finding community. And then me learning from all of them who had maybe been married for a decade or just got married. And we just kind of started this whole thing. I ended up navigating to social media where I just started sharing them in just a really fun, humorous way. But again, like I started just getting all these DMs and all these messages from people saying, you get it, and then asking me questions. And so I ended up kind of just taking that. I did that for a very long time. And then the last like 6 years, I actually ended up starting a membership for women in interracial relationships. I started coaching people who were like kind of just in the throes of just all the chaos, not knowing where to go. It just felt so fulfilling. So I feel like I look back on my 20-year-old self, like I wish I would have had someone to kind of do that. And it's not like I have all the answers and it's perfect. I've just walked the path. And so like we can talk about it, or I can direct them to other people who are walking their same path,
Yeah, and I think that part of I belong in this group because I don't feel like I belong in these other, like, even though this is a spouse that I love and we're committed, it's the whole extended family and all the culture. I can just imagine like walking even into an Indian wedding. It's not that you might fit in because you're wearing the outfit. Yeah. Maybe you learn the dance, but it's hard to understand what you're feeling as you're watching everything. I guess my kids are third culture kids, even though ethnically they are Indian. When they walk into those situations, they have those same kind of feelings because they grew up in a worldview of just one culture of Caucasian culture. So that's awesome that you have that set up. When you were growing up, did you have an interest in like global cultures? Did you imagine that this would be the type of life that you have? I have a friend who she grew up in rural white Texas, and she said, I cannot wait to get out because this world is so big and I want to learn about every country and eat every food and travel everywhere and have this international life. I was like, oh, that's interesting. What made you even think that? So for you, did you have any of those kinds of thoughts? Because I'm assuming Washington is a little bit more multicultural.
I wouldn't say that. I feel like at least specifically where I lived in Washington, it was like a very like white dominated area. I don't feel like there were a lot of other cultures. And at least like to my understanding as like my young self, I don't remember seeing a lot of other cultures. I did move around a little bit. So I actually ended up living in California for a little bit too. I had my understanding of like my white parents. And so I didn't really know much of anything else. Like there were not a lot of other cultures around me. And so I remember like one way I was always very adventurous was like food. I always loved trying new foods, and they're the pickiest eaters ever. And so like my mom thinks like ketchup is spicy, right? So she was not adventurous in what she was eating. And like I would just love it. I'd always want to try new things and experiment. And really it wasn't until I lived in California where I actually did a church intern where I met my husband. We had people from all over the world in that internship. And I think that for me was the beginning of, oh, there is this entire world around. I was a sign interpreter in the internship, which I didn't know any sign until the summer before, because I met a girl who was deaf. And I was like, wow, I want to learn everything about deaf culture. Like, I think this is fascinating. I want to be like, we were already friends. I want to learn. I don't want you to have to work harder to talk to me. Like, I'm going to work my butt off and figure out this out. So like that honestly like was the start of me like I just want to learn about everyone's cultures. My husband obviously was also in that internship. And so then, we were learning a little bit about India. We had students from Guatemala there. And so I feel like that was like this defining time in my life where my eyes were just opened. I thought that my culture was, even my kids had the same conversation, thinking your culture is the normal culture, right? Because that's like the phraseology that we learn as kids. And it wasn't until then where I was like, wow, like there's no such thing as normal culture. We all have different cultures, even two white people, two Indian people, two African Americans, like they can still have the same ethnic background, but their cultures are different because your culture is not just your language. It's not just, your ethnic background. It is everything that has made you who you are. It's your family, where you fit in the hierarchy of your siblings. Like, and I think that what was so interesting to me to see like that role that culture plays. And really, I think it's the lens that you see the world through. And my cultural lens that I saw the world through when I was a kid versus how I see it now as a mom to biracial kids and as a woman like in an interracial relationship, it's a completely different lens.
Okay, so you were doing this internship, but when you went to college or even in high school, when it came to your career, did you have any difficulty in choosing a vocational path?
It's funny, I had a completely different plan laid out for myself back then. I actually worked with kids with autism. And so I thought that was going to be my job forever. And I ended up having my first son, and I was like, nope, I'm going to take a break. And I stayed home. And we were also like dirt broke. Like, I don't have enough for childcare and all these other things. So I ended up choosing to stay home. And I think that was when I just started trying to figure out, like, what do I want with my career? I'm not quite sure.
Eventually, did you go into a specific like career path or training path? Because I see what you do today as
Mhm.
far as like helping people, and it feels like a counseling type of role. Did you train in any of that?
When I worked with kids with autism, we worked in a lot of applied behavioral therapies. And so it was a lot of like behaviorism, like learning how people work, learning why people work in these ways. And I was fascinated by that. So I was really able to dig in there. And I also, when I was a stay at home mom, I was the kids director at our church. So working a lot with like counseling families and, like one-on-one with couples or with parents and all those kinds of things. And so I think those were my experiences where I got to see how people worked, how I can help them. And I realized it's not just working with families who have a child with autism or working with families who have kids in kids ministry. I just really noticed this passion myself to help people. I loved seeing them say, hey, I'm struggling with this, and then helping them get the tools to thrive. And I absolutely loved that. And I still love that.
I'm so glad that you have that because I know it's really needed. For you, as you met Joel really young and got married really young and had kids really young, was there any struggle of like honoring your parents while you were living out this life that probably they didn't plan on? Or maybe you didn't plan on?
Our parents didn't necessarily sign up for an interracial relationship for their kids, right? They didn't sign up for this whole multiracial life. So I think for them, both of our parents were so welcoming. Like his parents welcomed me in so lovingly. My parents welcomed him in so lovingly. But I would say the not issues necessarily, like the struggles maybe, or the fact that they all had those very big expectations of what it would look like, And so I think for them, they had to walk their own path of here are my expectations based on my experiences in life. Now, what is it going to look like? And it was a big journey for all of us to figure out, how do we respect our parents and not force them to live this life, but also like encourage them into it. And I think that it took trial and error. It took us maybe being too strong with it, us too lax about it. and kind of trying to find how we navigate it and kind of what those rules, even along like holidays and things like that.
You know, I was born here. My parents came from India, but I was born here. And not just me, but with our whole community of my peers, a central focus of the brown life is marriage. But we're told, but you're not allowed to date, finish all your education, then get a job, then you can think about marriage, and then maybe you can choose a spouse, but we're going to heavily suggest people for you. And then you don't really like go on dates and start dating until after you're married. Did Joel experience that? And did you know any of that, or did you have any of that with your family?
Great question. So I think Joel's parents were, I don't think they anticipated doing an arranged marriage for him. Like obviously like his parents were arranged and many of his aunts and uncles were arranged, and same with all of his cousins. I think that they understood like that even just his track record and who he was dating, that he was not going to have an arranged marriage. So I don't think they expected that. We also, again, he got married at 23. And so I think a lot of those things, we did it pretty young. So I think for them, it was, make sure you're still getting your college done, like make sure you still focus. And he was obviously still smack dab in the middle of college. And so I think that was more of like, don't quit, like make sure you keep going. Because when we got married, like I was working with kids with autism and I did decent with work, and he was working when we were dating at Starbucks. And then when we got married, he was working with adults with developmental disabilities. But that was not his like career path. That was just what he was doing, And then I think with my parents, they didn't really have necessarily like any types of ideas of like get married young or don't. It was just like, please be happy and choose someone that's going to be like a really good match for you. So I think along those lines, there wasn't a lot of pressure for him and I, but I also didn't even understand the whole concept of arranged marriages when we got together. I think I did know that like his parents had an arranged marriage, and like very transparently, I was like, wow, how outdated. And that obviously goes to like my perspective back then was like, so just my bubble. Now I've seen many of his cousins and family members have arranged marriages, and I think it's beautiful, and being able to see like this trust in your parents and this choice and what that looks like. And so that the kids oftentimes are coming to their parents, hey, I'm ready, find someone for me. So I think it was a little bit different for us because of our ages, and I also don't know all the behind the scenes on all the conversations for him from like 18 to 23. But I think for him, the biggest thing was like, let's get college done.
You got married during his college, yes?
Yep.
Was that hard?
I mean, when we first got together, I mean, like literally like dirt broke. We're living in a 1-bedroom apartment because he was finishing school. We were both in school full time and working full time. But I mean, I guess that's what you kind of sign up for when you get married as infants, right? That's kind of what happened. But I wouldn't change it. It was definitely hard. And I look back sometimes, Joel and I kind of laugh when we like, do we want our kids getting married this young? And I'm like, well, if they can have a marriage like ours, it's beautiful and I love it.
Yeah.
But we also changed a lot. Like we are not those same people. Obviously, like we've gone through school and we like grew up together in our marriage even.
My husband and I got married 23, 22, and we were the first in our community to get married that young. It's the same. And now my kids are almost 27, 25, and 22. Yeah. I was like, oh my word, they should not get married. Like, but
isn't that funny how that works? You're like, wait, we were really young. We just like,
right. What were we doing? We are very similar in that both my husband and I are Malayalis, raised in America in the same Indian church denomination. And yet, I would say what characterizes our marriage is the scene in Big Fat Greek Wedding when the white family comes to the meal with the Greek family. Yes. That's how and yet we're similar. I think people think if you're from the same exact background, especially when they're doing arranged marriages, oh, it's all going to mesh. And it's completely, I mean, my in-laws and my parents, they all love each other, but it's just very different. Did you have any of those type of vibes and experiences with both of your families?
Yes. So I was already laughing when you said my Big Fat Greek Wedding. That was like my preparing for my wedding. Was me and my family watched that, and it was so funny. We still laugh about it. But yeah, I mean, again, like back then, I expected Joel, like he's going to prepare me for everything. He prepared me for nothing. Like he did not give me any warnings for anything like his family did. Hey, Britt, we eat with our hands. Hey, Britt, don't eat with this hand. Hey, Britt, do this, don't do that. That was his family, not Joel, right? And it's because
he didn't tell you any of that?
Way. And I don't know what he laughed, like, I was going to throw you to the lion's den and see what happened. I'm like, no, you didn't know. Like, you were just this punk kid back then that didn't know what to prepare me for.
Yeah.
So I think I have those moments initially where I don't know what I'm doing, like not knowing, like, can I ask them to put subtitles on? Because I don't know what like this Hindi speaking movie is. Like, I'm not even following along. I'm just sitting here like looking like an idiot, not knowing what to do. Right. Like, I didn't know any of these things. Going to India and being the only white person there, like, I felt so out of my element all the time. And so I was like, this is my path. I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to like ask a lot of questions. We're going to figure it all out together. Every time Joel didn't tell me things, I kind of had to figure out who in the family to ask questions before we would arrive to things. So for my parents, like, the first time they really like met my in-laws in person was our wedding. So I had to be like, okay, here are some things to think about or to not do. If you're offered food, just take it and just try it. Because my parents are super picky eaters. So I was like, let's not offend everyone the first time you see them by telling them you don't want anything, right? You're going to see people eating with their hands. Like, make sure that my brothers don't call people by their first names. Like, I failed my way into all those lessons, calling my mother-in-law by her first name, all the things. And they gave me a lot of grace, thankfully. I was the one that kind of had to tell them, like, here's what to do. And they did it. It was a huge culture shock for them. They were just kind of going around figuring it out too. One of the things I will say that I can look back on and be so grateful for is that even though I failed often, I did the wrong things, or my family didn't know what to do, Joel's family was so welcoming, and they never let my parents feel awkward. They went to so many events during that whole wedding week, and like his aunts and uncles were always there helping and like making sure that they felt okay, like bringing them like, oh, you guys come over here with me, come sit with me. I think if that wouldn't have happened, I don't think my parents would have felt very comfortable. But knowing that like his family made such an effort to go above and beyond, like, I could never be more grateful than that,
Yeah, that is awesome, because that is not common. And that stereotype of like the in-laws in India is like even more amplified. And I think because of like years of culturally how the husband's family, you're marrying into their family. I don't want to say servant attitude, especially if you come from a church background. Like, there's a very positive spin on servant attitude in the church, but not in India. I'm so glad you did not experience that. In fact, I just saw a meme or a TikTok of a white woman married to an Indian man, and she's bringing chai to the in-laws. And then she's like, oh, I'm so hot. I've been like in the kitchen. And the mother-in-law is just giving her this evil eye of like,
oh no,
you just made chai. And like, she's like, it took me a really long time. And I was like, oh, that's so painful to like feel that. So I'm glad you did not have that.
Yeah, well, and I think too, I mean, it is hard. I still don't have chai down. I'm not gonna lie. Like, we go through all this effort to like learn all these things. And, when you've been born and raised in a certain culture, those things come more naturally because you've been raised doing it. You've done it for years, right? And so I think coming in and trying things, like, it is different. It is hard. And over the last 6 years, I've worked with so many couples who have had in-laws that are not welcoming, that don't want them. I've had in-law or like couples that have broken up because like one side of the family just won't accept an interracial relationship. And I'm so grateful that I didn't experience any of those hardships. Again, the hardest thing that we experienced was the expectations that our families had. But again, it wasn't even malicious. It was based on their experiences. Like, that's just what they knew. I think even with all of that, like, it's our job too, to break down this idea of being this perfect person. Like, I always talk about all the mistakes that I've made. So I think that's part of my journey. And, I'm sure like I can remember some of the looks that I got back when I made some of those mistakes, but they knew like Bria has no clue what she's doing, and I've also gotten into like disagreements with family because they thought I was being malicious when I had to sit them down and be like, hey, I just don't know. Like, here's what my culture says. My culture says, like, when you, like, for instance, hospitality, my culture says you go in like that's your home. Like, you just sit back, you go into the fridge, you grab a drink. Like, it's all very, again, independent. You don't have to do those things. You go to like an Indian family member's house and it's like they're expected to wait on you. So like when I would host my in-laws, I'd be like, oh, cool. Like, are you hungry? Like, oh yeah. Help yourself to the fridge or do that. And that scene is so rude. And now I get it. Now I understand, right? It's like in my 30s, like I can understand, like, oh, like that's not what they're expecting, and I can change up my routine. But back then, like, it probably looked really malicious. Like I was just a jerk, and I just didn't know better. And so that's where I think we just have to talk about it. We have to just create those conversations, like explain to people and have them know that like those cultural differences change every type of how you behave, you know?
Right, right. But when you met Joel and you were dating, did Joel talk a lot about his Indian cultural background for you to even understand that? Because it feels like, I mean, if he didn't, I mean, did he tell you that when you go to their house, you take off your shoes?
No, he
Okay,
didn't
so
tell
that
me
I feel like
anything.
that's the problem.
Yes, obviously. Let's blame Joel for sure. We'll just drag him a little bit over the coals. No, well, and I think too, like one of the biggest things I tell couples is prepare your partner. And I joke
Yeah,
and I like tease out my husband, like my husband didn't. And again, I mean, like the funny thing is I just would have expected him to know it all. But even for him, he just went along with things when he was 23. So
yeah,
he didn't even know what to prepare me for, what to say. He just
right.
thought a lot of the times he thought that our families just did things the exact same way. So he'd come to my house, take off his shoes, and I wouldn't even pay attention to that. When we were dating, like we lived by my parents in California. His parents lived in Chicago at the time. So we were only by my parents. So obviously, you know, he had been raised in America for a very, very long time, right? So a lot of that was still normal for him. He had had enough white friends and American friends that none of those were big culture shocks to him. So for him, it was like, we're dating, we're by Britt's family, like this is the main culture that we are embracing right now. It was not until we got engaged and started planning a fusion wedding that I was like, whoa, our cultures are very different. I didn't realize how different they were going to be.
A lot of us who grew up in Indians who grew up in America, I think a lot of us tried to minimize our Indian background, or we lived dual lives where we,
Yeah.
especially if, like we did a lot of Indian cultural things on the weekends, but on the weekdays in our school setting, we're more American. So it doesn't
Yeah.
surprise. I'm not blaming Joel. I'm just
I'll blame
making
him.
an observation. That doesn't feel so abnormal. What was funny
Yeah.
is when I went to college, that was the first time when I went to India Club, all these Indian kids that came to college who did not embrace their Indian heritage growing up. But now that they're in
Mm-hmm.
college, they found each
Yeah.
other. And then all of a sudden we're like, we're Indian. And I'm
Yeah.
the same thing. I did the same thing
Yeah.
too.
Yep.
And it was just fascinating to see. And now I'm watching social media, and these people who are second generation Indians and other ethnicities too are
Yeah.
very much like, I'm Indian and I'm making products that are Indian and I'm being part of these Indian celebrations.
Yeah.
Like, oh, like back then, that was if your parents dragged you, but
You're
you didn't
forced.
do that for yourself.
I had to learn that Joel embracing his culture was his own journey. And so like when we got together, like exactly like you said, we were definitely together embracing like the American side, American culture. And it really wasn't until we had kids, he started embracing his Indian side a lot more. And I think that that was the point where he was like, hey, I want this to be a big part of my kids' lives. The way that we have embraced both sides of like the culture in our family has been so different over the years. I didn't understand that until now, watching my kids go through it, watching like which one of my kids really want to embrace their Indian side with their friends, which ones don't. We did teacher gift bags for Teacher Appreciation Day. So I'm thinking to myself, like, oh, I want to make like, you know, give them gifts. Like I got 4 kids, like they've gone through the ringer with my kids. I want to say thank you. So I did like some fun things, but I also was like, I want these to be different. I want them to stand out. And I want to show like my kids' culture in it. So I put a bunch of Indian like sweets and snacks in it. 2 of my kids loved it. Thought it
Yeah.
was the best thing ever. They were like, I can't wait for them to try this. This is my favorite Indian snack. One of my kids, we got into a drag out fight over it. And finally,
Wow.
because they're like, I'm not bringing that. Like, I don't want them to say I have Indian snacks. And I was like,
Oh,
why? Like, I don't understand. Finally, I had to apologize and say, this is your culture. This is your journey. I have no say. So like I can give it as an option, but ultimately, like I am so sorry for pressuring you. And I'm watching how they're kind of embracing because you know, kids don't want to stand out. As an
right,
adults, we want to stand out. We want to be like, we want to be different and unique. Kids don't. And so I think
right.
all of that, like it's their process, it's their path, it's their journey, and they have to process it as they're comfortable, you know?
Yeah. Well, speaking of your kids, I watch you on Instagram. You have your kids on there a lot.
Mm-hmm.
How has that journey been for them? I
Yeah.
mean, are they even aware like that they're out there and thousands of people watch them? and hear their comments?
First, it was like I only had them once in a while. Like they came a couple of times, like kind of when they wanted to. Then they started having fun with it and they wanted to do more. Then, like as our like stuff just kind of grew, they wanted to be on it more and they had ideas for videos. And I don't think they understood how many people saw until we had one like super viral video of the kids running home from the bus, Emmy running towards them. And I think it has like 25 million views.
Wow.
And that was the moment because we started being on all these TV shows. We went on Kelly Clarkson, we did all these things. Still to this day, they don't understand like what a big deal it was to be on the Kelly Clarkson show. So like that was, I think, when it started to be like, oh wow, like maybe more people see this than we thought.
Mm-hmm.
Then it got to a point where their friends were like, we all follow you guys. And so I think it kind of started to shift for them where it was like something they really liked, but then also they started to feel a little pressure on it because they're like, our friends see it, we want to be cool. Well, they've had some really sweet kids message in. And so like, hey, it's so cool to see Indian kids out there. Like my mom's white or my dad's white, you know, my mom or dad are Indian. Like it's so cool to see other kids like us. Then I started to think like it went from like, this is really fun and we're cool to maybe we're doing something. That part is just awakening in them.
Yeah.
And I love it. I think it's amazing.
Aw, that is really neat. Now, as they're getting older, I know that there's a shift that happens with puberty, and the sweet, cuddly children that you had are different. And it's coming. How do you feel like that's going to play into your social media?
Yeah, well, again, I'll always be super honest. My kids get paid for being on social media. My thought is, if I make money on it and they're in the videos, they get like a small amount each month for just participating. It's like a job, it's like with good attitude. So for now, it's their first job. So like they want to do well, they want to like work hard on these things. But I've always told them that here's the deal. You guys could quit today. And I will say, sounds great. I love you so much. Like there's no pressure to be in these. If you ever don't want to be in them, there's no big deal. I pay you guys because I don't feel right taking all of the money and not giving you a part of it. That doesn't feel good to me. But again, if you guys choose to do something else, we'll find another way for you guys to earn money at home. Right. So that part they love. Like, I think they can see that, like, I work hard, I get a benefit and I get a reward from this. Right.
Right.
But as you said, kids change. And I have 2 middle schoolers now, and we've had conversations on, would you be upset if I quit? And I've said no. Like at any point I said, I know that like my job is working you guys out of the picture so that if you ever don't want to, it's fine. And there's no big deal because I don't anticipate them being in them forever. Right. You know? And so I kind of understand that. And so, yeah, I think for me, the biggest thing right now, since they still choose to be in them, is more so teaching them boundaries. Yeah. So say, for instance, one of our rules is I have a hot temper, I'll admit it. So if I start getting like grumpy because like we're redoing something, they all have the right to say, hey mom, this doesn't feel like a good like environment right now. Can we pause and do this later? And I will say, yep, you're right. I'm so sorry. And I do my best to like stop it first, but if I don't, they call me out on it. You know, or if they say, hey mom, I love that idea, but I don't feel comfortable doing that video. Sounds great. We won't do that video. Yeah. So I think for now, I'm trying to give them the tools to say what they want to do, how they want to do it, so that when it does get to a point where they want to back out or do way less or do their own thing, they can.
That feels wise. They have a voice, which I think a lot of times in parenting, we don't let our kids have a voice because we're right.
Yeah. Yes.
That feels awesome that you do it that way. And it is fun to watch all of them.
Yeah.
But it seems like you do a lot. 4 kids, 3 of them boys. I'm not saying anything about boys. I'm just saying that they're boys. But how do you manage taking care of yourself, your marriage, friendships? Do you have any tips for how you're trying to live that out and yet still have meaningful work?
Yeah, that's so good. I think for me, it's just been about priorities. You know, like I have to really say, like, there's just not enough hours in the day to do everything. You know, like even right now, Joel's traveling for work and it's like, I'm solo parenting it. But I think for me, it's about priorities. Like, what are the most important things? For me in the past, work hasn't been a priority. You know, I've had seasons where I've just not wanted to do it a lot or I've not needed to. In this season of life, it is a priority. I love it. Like, it's very life-giving to me. Spending quality time with my kids is a priority. My marriage is a top priority. Spending time with friends is a priority, but it's also my top priority. So I have to kind of like prioritize what's important, what I can do. everything else just isn't. So for me, like a clean house, that is not the top of my list. I like a clean house. Like I would love to say it's clean all the time. It is not. My house gets messy, cluttered. I have a 4-year-old, like it gets crazy. So whatever is not a priority for me, I just ask for help. Today, my babysitter, like one of my really good girls, like her name is Ellie, and she takes my kids. So I'm like, I just need a break. I can't think today. She just took them all today, so I could have a break. It's a couple hours after, so I can be by myself, do whatever I need. So I ask for help with babysitting. I have a house cleaner. We've actually become friends over the last couple of years because she has been with me forever. She'll come like twice a month, and I'll be like, I can't do this. Like, I don't have enough capacity to deep clean my house all the time. Can you please help me? So that's what I think has been a game changer. I think as women, as moms, we have this idea and this sense of pressure that we have to do it all by ourselves. And I did that for a very long time, but to my detriment. And that meant that I was no priority in my life. And so I was last. My marriage was first. I did everything to please my husband. My kids were first. I did everything to please them. But all of a sudden I was like, just like this empty vessel where I was like, I don't have anything else to give. Right. And that didn't feel good. And it's like that concept of like when you're in a plane, right? They tell you to put the mask on yourself first before your kids because you'll pass out. And right. I used to hate that idea, but it's real. Like if I don't take care of myself, there's nothing left to give my kids or my husband or my work or anything else. It's a lot and it's a balance and you play with it. And, you know, I'm really open with my kids. Like I cry in front of my kids. I tell my kids I'm overwhelmed. There's been many moments where they've said, hey, mom, are you okay? You're getting angry or you're emotional. And I've said, you know what? I'm taxed. Like I'm out. Like I've got nothing left today. And my boys, like we have the dynamic where they've said, hey, mom, I know dad's out of town. We want to help you. So we'll put Emmy to bed. You go take a bath and we'll clean up. They don't do that to get something from you. They do that because they see that like we are a team. We all have to be there. We're going to help. And so I think it's all of that. You know, yeah. I know it's a very long answer, but priorities, ask for help and be open when you can't do it all.
Right, right. No, that sounds very healthy because you've learned, okay, there needs to be this rhythm, but I'm part of that rhythm, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because if mama's not doing good,
it all
unravels. Yes.
Yes, yes.
So your husband is very prominent in like the church world and Christian ministry. For you, because I think there used to be, I don't know if there is now, that the pastor's wife is supposed to blank, right? But you do have your own personal faith. How do you live out your faith in a way that honors who you are while being Joel's wife?
Yeah, no, such a good question. So I think that whole pastor's wife thing, that it's real. You know, like, I mean, when we were younger, he was a pastor in a lot of different churches and did things like that. And there is like a lot of pressure to be a pastor's wife, you know, and like what your life has to look like, how your behavior is. And I think that there's probably churches where it's a lot better now, you know, because I think they have more like attainable expectations for women and people in general. But I think that we had to navigate that. And I actually had to get to a spot where I was like, hey, when I'm just Joel's wife, when I'm just the pastor's wife, I'm lost in that. And then it feels like I have no identity and I don't love that. I'm an 8 on the Enneagram. So like, I am a very like strong, independent person. Like I was raised to be that by my mom and my mom's family. And having my own identity is very important. I have my own job. I have my own things. So I think part of it was carving a space out for myself. My husband has always been so affirming of that, so encouraging of like, Britt, have your own space, do your own thing. And I think if he wasn't like that, I feel like I would have gotten lost a long time ago. So I'm very grateful that he's never wanted me to just be his wife. It's like, let's do all of these things. And he champions me on and celebrate. That's all awesome. But to be honest, let's just take our jobs, for instance. Our jobs are very different. Like he works, like you said, smack dab in Christian community. My whole job is in the secular community. You know, and I do that on purpose because not all of my clients are Christians. Like not all of the people that follow me are Christians. I think that there is a place for all of us having such different platforms, having such different jobs and everything. We also at home behind the scenes have to talk about boundaries. We both have certain topics we won't discuss on social media because not just because our viewpoints are different, but because we want to respect each other's platforms.
Right.
You know, there are certain things specifically that he could talk about that might hurt people in my platform, and he would never want to do that. And granted, we do have a lot of the same ideas, beliefs, thoughts, everything else, but our communities don't. And so we try to be very careful and like honor each other's spaces. And it just goes back to a lot of boundaries within that, making sure that we affirm each other and celebrate each other, even though it looks different.
No, I love that. And even for me, I have an Instagram page for all my foodie things and the podcast and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Then I have my other page that's more of like my work in Christian nonprofit, personal thoughts and ideas. And I will cross over and be like, hey, if you want to know more about this, go to this other page. People come to your page for a specific reason. It's that how do we use our platforms in a way that's respectful of people who are watching and what they're looking for, but also not hiding like, and I'm not going to show you any part of this. Like if they want to, they can click on your, I think in your bio, it says you're married to Joel, right? Like they can obviously cross over.
Well, and like even in our bios, like in his bio, I'm there. I think in my bio, he's there. Like we cross over all the time. And like for me, it's like, hey, if you want like the Christian space, if that's what you want, you should follow Joel. He's amazing and he's so wise. Yeah. And we do have a lot of followers that follow us both. And so I think it's finding the balance. Like he knows I love to have my own thing. I know that he likes to have his own thing. Like things on my profile, he necessarily wouldn't post on his and vice versa. And that's okay. And I think that there's also like another layer to this, that a lot of couples think that they have to have everything in common or that they have to be in the exact same space as each other. Joel and I are such different people, just personality wise, that never would have worked for us. And I think that when we tried to have everything the same, it hurt us more than anything. So I think for us, like, again, just giving each other space and creating space for each other, it feels validating. Like he sees me for who I am and doesn't want to change me. I see him for who he is and I don't want to change him, And so that's, I think, like the type of love that we have fostered within our relationship.
And I think it's good to know every couple is different. So that is great for you guys. And then there are other couples where they do everything together and everything is intertwined. And that's great for them too. That it doesn't have to be this one way.
Yep.
On your highlights reel, there's so many like fun times, but everybody has ups and downs. What is something that today you're personally working on to grow and change?
So many things. I think one of them is being open with like the raw grit of who we are. Again, like I think social media is hard. Like they want you to be like this perfect person. They want you to be the perfect family, the perfect everything. And one of the big shifts that I've made this year is we're anything but perfect. So like, here's like what we actually look like. Here's like the real stuff behind the scenes. And I think for me personally, it's feeling comfortable with the people who don't like us. Like again, like I was raised a people pleaser. I want everyone to love me. And it's not to be popular. It's just that like, I want truly like behind the scenes, like I want you to like me. I want my mom to like me. I want my mother-in-law to like me. I want my kids to like me. And I think I've had to get to a spot where I understand that I'm not everyone's cup of tea, And so like our family, like the more real that we get our chaos, the wild parts of who we are, if people don't like us and like they make those comments on our TikToks or our reels, that's okay. And so I think for me, it's just getting really comfortable in who I am. And just not letting like the trolls get to us. We had a lot of troll comments. And one of the things is I've never been the person to like blast them because I think I don't like the toxicity of that. I think toxicity just breeds toxicity and it's just like this endless cycle. But I had a fun way to respond to a troll the other day. And I think that's going to be like my new thing. They said something about how we're like bad parents to our kids or something. And so I took the comment and I overlaid it on our video and I read it, but I read something positive instead. I was like, you love our family and love to watch us. That's so sweet of you. Thank you for being so kind. And I told them about our family. I just want to be a positive space. And I think that I want to create that positiveness for my kids. And part of that is just being comfortable in our own skin and who we are.
And also, it's sometimes funny to watch in the comment section when there is a hater and then people are defending you and it goes back and forth. It's like, oh, there are people who like me.
I think that feels good to be like, you know what, like that's 1% out of all these people. And that's okay. Like if they don't like us, they're in the wrong space. They should just unfollow or stop, or not comment. So this isn't for them. And that's all right.
It's flabbergasting how people just don't unfollow. Or they're like, I'm going to unfollow you now. Like, Okay.
But I think those people, they want attention. It's like they
Right.
want negative attention, right? Like they want any type of like enforcement or reinforcement of their behavior. So truly, when you just don't engage, it's fine.
Time is running out, but some more Indian-centric questions.
Yeah.
Are you involved in the raising of curry plants or jasmine plants?
Oh Lordy, y'all, I've got a brown thumb. Like I cannot keep a single plant alive. I just had to apologize to my mother-in-law because she gave us a beautiful jasmine plant. I killed it in like a week. You know, because Joel went out of town. He said, "Babe, don't touch my plant." I said, "Scout's honor, I won't touch your plant." But then he was gone. I was like, I should probably put it outside. It's nice outside today, and I killed it. So I had to be like, "Mom, I'm so sorry. I killed your jasmine plant." And now there's a rule in our family that I'm not allowed around any plant. So.
You mentioned earlier that you're working on your chai skills, but for you,
Yes.
if you had to choose a beverage, would you choose chai or like tea with hot water or coffee or mango lassi or like any other beverage? What's your like go-to treat?
It's a hard question. I mean, first of all, I love chai, but I have to be like in the right mood for like hot chai. Like I don't like hot drinks. But if I go to any auntie or uncle's house, like I will drink a good hot chai with you. Iced chai, like I'm all about like iced coffee, but like my go-to in the summer is limca. And then honestly, you're gonna laugh, but Joel and I even learned how to make like a limca cocktail. That's like our go-to like date night beverage. Like it's so yummy.
I'm feeling like a limca cocktail is basically a gin and tonic.
Exactly. It's exactly like a gin and tonic. And it's the best thing ever. And Joel and I like we like get all like we will go to like Patel Brothers. We'll like, we have like a box of limca. It's ridiculously priced. We will get it. And then at home, we all fight over the limca because even the 4-year-old's like, "Mommy, can I have a limca?" No, you cannot. Those are for mommy and daddy.
Yeah. Aw. Do you have a favorite crunchy snack from the Indian store to go with it?
Everything. Right now, our Patel Brothers like have like a little like hot section in the back where they fresh make all these goodies. And I discovered onion samosas, which I would be like, no way, they're gross. Best thing ever. I don't know why they're so good, but I will go there. Every time I go grocery shopping, I just get a bunch of samosas and me and Emmy eat them in the car.
Is there potatoes in the onion samosa? Like, what does that mean?
No, it's just, I don't know. It's like just onions and like the pastry on the outside and they get it with all like the different chutneys. You would think it's like too plain, but it's delicious. So Emmy and I will eat those. And then they also have like the regular potatoes, peas, I'm not sure what else is in it. I think it's just that. And then those are good, but they're super spicy. So those are just me. Like, because the kids are like, it's too spicy for us. And I have like built up a spice tolerance. You'd be so proud of me.
Do you like any of like the Lay's potato chips, but they're actually Indian flavors, or the kurkuri chips? They look like cheese doodles.
My kids love those.
Yeah.
Yes, my kids love them. There is one, I don't even know what it's called. My father-in-law always gets it. It's like, you're going to die. I almost explain it like it's like a, what do they call it, trail mix, like all the different little crunchy snacks. I don't know what it's called. Yeah, maybe it's that one. But I don't know. My father-in-law always gets it. And it's like, it's like salty. Sometimes like there's a little bit of spice to it, and it's so good.
I've been learning things about India. Like in Kerala, we call that mixture. But in Gujarati culture, it's called chevdo, and I think it's different names, like the generic name for it. But then there's different brands. So the brand that we like, it's called Halidrums, Halidram.
I think that's what it is.
And it's like a reddish bag, and it's like starts with a K, I think. But it's the sweet and salty, crunchy.
He gets all of them. Like he's gotten that one before. He gets another one. I think it comes in a green bag. Whenever I go over there, he's always like snacking on it, like for movies and shows that he's watching. It's so good.
Banana chips? So do you all do banana chips?
I do those a lot. We do like plantain chips a lot at our house.
Yeah, plantain chips. I think in India they say banana chips, but they mean plantain chips.
Yep. We love those.
Awesome. Okay, so based on everything you know today, what would you say to 18-year-old Brittany?
It's okay to not know what's going on. It's okay to be uncomfortable. Just keep going. And I think the biggest thing is just talk a lot. Like ask questions, talk to your partner, express your boundaries, but just talk. Back then, I was so scared of being uncomfortable. And I think even like in Christian circles, but I think also like in secular circles too, like there is this idea that being uncomfortable is bad. And granted, like there's certain times that if you're uncomfortable, like trust your gut for sure. But I was like, if I'm uncomfortable, it's not good, so I shouldn't do it. But when my like worldview and my life and experiences were so limited, of course I was going to be uncomfortable stepping out of my box. And I think like just being okay with that and just going and knowing that I can ask questions. I can say, hey, I'm uncomfortable. What should I do to like help myself? Or how can I like, feel more confident here? Like just talk a lot and just be uncomfortable and
Yeah.
embrace it.
If people want to find you, where should they go?
Basically all platforms, but mainly like I'm the most active on TikTok and Instagram. You just go find me at Almost Indian Way.
And is there any projects or anything that you want people to know about?
So I have a membership that is for women, specifically in interracial relationships. It has been so amazing. It's women around the world. We get together twice a week, Tuesday nights at 9 p.m. EST, Thursdays at 3 p.m. EST. And we talk about everything from, hey, my partner hasn't told their family about me yet. Is that normal? To red flags, to how do I embrace my partner's culture, to my in-laws don't accept me. And I think ultimately it is just a community of women who want to celebrate with each other, encourage each other in a very positive way. We vent, but then after we're done venting, we say, okay, what's next? How do we grow? How do we keep moving? So if you are looking for a community, it's called the Mixed Membership. You can go on Instagram and look under the Mixed Membership.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Brittany, for sharing about your life and your family. And it has been great to just hang out with you. And my favorite part is when I have like fun guests like you to just be able to laugh with, but then also talk about the deep stuff. So thanks for sharing.
Yeah. Oh, no, thank you so much for having me. I had a great time.
Thank you so much for joining me today. Isn't Brittany great? Definitely follow her on the socials, especially if you need a good laugh. And if you are looking for resources, if you're in a multicultural marriage, definitely check her out as well. I hope you join me for my next episode. Till then, be wise and be bold.